The alarm pierced the silence of Station 7 like a blade. Commander Mark Sterling didn't need to check the monitors to know something was wrong. 20 years operating in the galaxy's shadows had sharpened his instincts to surgical precision. He was already sprinting through the metallic corridors before the second alert pulse echoed. The station orbited a dead planet on the edge of the Orion Arm, far from the eyes of the Galactic Council. Officially, this hunk of rock and metal didn't even exist in the records, but for the human resistance, it was one of the last sanctuaries where the truth could still be spoken out loud. Mark burst into the command center, where Lieutenant Sarah Miller was already working frantically at the holographic consoles. Her fingers danced between blue projections of encrypted data as she muttered a sequence of codes. "Report," Mark ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. 3 warp signatures detected on the outer perimeter. "Navigation patterns match Vryn trackers," Sarah replied without looking away from the screens. "They found us, Commander. Protocol Delta is compromised." Mark felt that familiar chill run down his spine. The Vryn were the Council's favorite mercenary race, known for their brutal efficiency and total lack of moral qualms. If they were here, the order to silence Station 7 had already been issued. Time to intercept? 17 minutes. Maybe less if they pushed their approach speed. 17 minutes. Mark forced his brain to process the options. The station had no heavy weaponry, only basic defense systems designed to deflect space debris. Against Vryn cruisers equipped with plasma cannons, it would be like defending a paper shack against a hurricane. But humans hadn't made it this far by accepting the obvious. "Wake everyone up. Ghost protocol. I want the reactors in silent mode in 5 minutes," Mark commanded. "And prepare the Omega file for immediate transmission." Sarah hesitated for a split second. The Omega file contained 2 decades of intelligence on the Council's secret operations. Every documented atrocity, every act of sabotage against humanity meticulously recorded. It was the proof the world needed to see, but transmitting it meant revealing their position for good. "Confirmed, sir." While Sarah executed the orders, Mark activated the internal comms. "Attention, all sectors. We have uninvited guests. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. This is not a drill." The station instantly roared to life. Airtight doors slammed, shut with pneumatic hisses. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in blood red. Through the observation window, Mark could see the distant stars, indifferent to the human drama about to unfold. Dr. Andrew Vance came running into the command center, his gray hair messy and his glasses crooked on his nose. At 63, he was the oldest on the station and also the most brilliant. His mind had cracked the Vryn warp technology years ago, finally allowing humanity to reach the stars without the Council's permission. "Mark, the experiment data hasn't been backed up yet. I need 10 more minutes," Andrew protested, out of breath. "You have 4. After that, you're either in an escape pod or I'm dragging you there myself." The scientist grumbled something under his breath but ran back to his lab. Sarah looked up, worry etched into every line of her face. "Commander, even if we manage to evacuate, where do we go? Every known route is under Council surveillance. We're mapped out." Mark stepped toward the central console and zoomed in on the star system's holographic projection. Points of light represented dead planets, asteroid fields, and known navigation routes. But there was something else. Something he and Andrew had been studying in secret. 3 months ago, we detected a gravitational anomaly in Sector J7, Mark explained, tracing a route with his finger through the hologram. Andrew believes it's a natural warp corridor, unmapped by the Council, a rift in the fabric of space. "You're talking about navigating an untested wormhole," Sarah said slowly. "The chances of survival are better than 0, which is what we have here." A new alarm blared. The Vryn had accelerated. Now only 12 minutes remained. Mark activated the general comms again. Engineering team, divert all auxiliary power to the escape pod. Engines. Science crew, abandon all non-essential equipment. Take only the data. He turned to Sarah. Start the Omega file transmission. Wide frequency, all known civilian channels. If we're going down, let's light up the darkness. Sarah nodded, her hands flying over the controls. Seconds later, terabytes of classified information began pouring out of the station in every direction of known space. Reports on the silent colonization protocol, videos of council agents sabotaging fusion reactors in human colonies, documents proving Earth had been deliberately kept in environmental crisis to prevent human expansion. The raw, naked truth, broadcast to any receiver that could catch it. Transmission active. They'll triangulate us in seconds, Sarah warned. Let them come. They already know where we are anyway. Andrew came running back, clutching 3 crystal data drives to his chest like they were babies. I got it. The modified warp calculations, everything's here. Excellent. Now move. The 3 of them sprinted through the station's corridors as the entire structure began to vibrate. The Vryn were closer, their long-range weapons already testing Station 7's shields. Energy pulses ricocheted off the defensive barriers, creating blue flashes that lit up the surrounding vacuum. The escape pod bay was in controlled chaos. 17 crew members ran back and forth, checking systems and loading essential gear. The pods were small, designed for 6 people each. They would have to squeeze in. Pod status, Mark shouted over the noise. Alpha and Beta ready for launch. Gamma has a thermal coupler issue, but it'll work, replied Chief Engineer Mike Logan, a compact man with hands covered in calluses and burn scars. Commander Sterling? Sarah's voice echoed over the comms. She had stayed behind in the command center. The Vryn are requesting our immediate surrender. They promised treatment according to galactic laws. Mark almost laughed. Tell them they can shove their galactic laws into the nearest black hole. A pause. Then Sarah replied, and there was a smile in her voice. Message transmitted, sir. In those exact words. The station shook violently. One of the Vryn cannons had pierced the outer shield layer. Lights flickered, and the artificial gravity system failed for 3 seconds before stabilizing. Everyone to the pods. Now, Mark ordered. The crew obeyed with military precision. Every person knew their assigned position, rehearsed in hundreds of simulations they all hoped they'd never actually use. But the resistance didn't survive by luck. It survived by preparation. Mark was the last to board the Alpha pod, alongside Sarah, Andrew, and 4 other crew members. Through the sealed hatch, he could see the Beta pod being locked down with the rest of the team. The Gamma pod was empty, programmed as a decoy. Coordinates entered for the warp corridor, Sarah informed him, her fingers already working the navigation panel. I hope Dr. Vance is right about this anomaly. I'm always right, Andrew grumbled from his seat, obsessively checking the data drives. Another impact rocked the station. This time, a secondary explosion echoed through the metallic halls. The Vryn weren't testing defenses anymore. They were attacking to destroy. Launch in 3, 2, 1. Now. The pods were catapulted into the vacuum with brutal G-force. Mark felt his stomach churn as the pod engines roared to life, pushing them away from Station 7 at maximum speed. Through the small observation window, Mark watched his home of the last 5 years explode in silence. Flowers of orange fire bloomed for an instant before being smothered by the void. Station 7 fragmented into twisted pieces of metal that spun slowly in space. But the Vryn didn't stop. 2 of the 3 cruisers adjusted their trajectory, chasing the fleeing pods. They're on our tail, Sarah warned, unnecessarily. Everyone could see the glowing dots closing in on the sensors. Beta pod, implement Sigma evasion pattern. Gamma pod, activate decoy, and veer 5 degrees starward north, Mark commanded over the comms. The Gamma pod obeyed, its trajectory pulling away while emitting fake energy signatures. One of the Vryn cruisers took the bait and followed it, but the other remained locked onto the Alpha pod. "Time to the warp corridor?" Mark asked. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. "If we make it," Sarah replied, her voice tense. The Vryn opened fire. Energy blasts sliced through space, passing dangerously close. One of them hit the Beta pod, making its shields flicker orange. Beta reporting damage to secondary thrusters. Losing speed, Chief Logan's voice crackled over the comms. Mark made an instant decision. "Beta, veer 45 degrees. Seek cover in the nearby asteroid field. Alpha will draw their attention." "Negative, Commander." "We're not leaving you," Logan protested. "That's an order. Someone needs to survive to tell this story." Silence. Then, reluctantly, "Confirmed." "Good luck, Commander." The Beta pod changed course, diving toward a dense cluster of space rocks. The Vryn cruiser hesitated, split between two targets, before maintaining its focus on the Alpha pod. 1 minute to the corridor, Sarah counted down. The space ahead of them began to distort visually, a region where the stars looked stretched and doubled. The gravitational anomaly, the unmapped warp corridor, their only hope. The Vryn fired again, and this time they hit. The Alpha pod spun violently, emergency systems screaming alarms. Acrid smoke filled the compartment. "We lost the aft stabilizer. We won't be able to navigate straight through the corridor in this condition," Sarah shouted. Andrew unbuckled from his seat and stumbled to the engineering panel, ignoring Mark's protests. His aging but still steady hands flew over the controls. "If we reroute power from life support and boost the front thrusters to 120%, we can compensate for the damage," he said quickly, "but we'll only have 6 hours of oxygen." "Do it," Mark ordered. 30 seconds. The warp corridor was right ahead, an invisible scar in the fabric of reality that promised salvation or total annihilation. The Vryn fired one last salvo. Superheated energy cooked the space around the pod, but they were already crossing the threshold. Reality fragmented. Mark felt his body being stretched in directions that shouldn't exist. Colors that had no name exploded in his vision. For an eternal and instantaneous moment, he was nowhere and everywhere at once. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ended. The Alpha pod emerged on the other side of the corridor in a completely unknown star system. Alien stars shone in configurations no human database would recognize. And behind them, the warp corridor collapsed in on itself, sealing the passage. They were safe, for now. But they were also lost, adrift in an unexplored region of the galaxy, with only 6 hours of air and no way to contact the Beta pod or any other fragment of the Resistance. Mark looked at his companions. Sarah, controlling her breathing and already working to map their new location. Andrew, clutching his precious data. The other 4 crew members, scared but alive. "Welcome to the unknown," Mark said calmly. "Now the real work begins." The silence inside the Alpha pod was absolute, broken only by the constant hum of life support systems operating at minimum capacity. Mark Sterling floated in 0G near the observation window, studying the unknown star system surrounding them. 3 suns orbited each other in a complex gravitational dance, painting the vacuum in shades of amber, violet, and pale green. 5 hours and 43 minutes of oxygen left. Sarah Miller worked frantically at the navigation console, her fingers sliding through holographic projections as she tried to triangulate their position. Every calculation produced impossible results. According to the data, they had crossed nearly 40,000 light-years in a matter of seconds. If that were true, they were further from Earth than any human had ever been. "I found something," Sarah announced, her voice cutting, the silence like a blade. "There's an artificial energy signature 3 million kilometers from here, faint, but definitely not natural." Mark pushed himself toward the console, grabbing the stabilization handles. "Signature type?" inconsistent with Vrin technology, the Council, or anything in our databases. Whatever it is, it's not human and doesn't belong to any known race. Andrew Vance emerged from the engineering section, grease stains on his face, and his hair even messier. I managed to stabilize the propulsion system, but the stabilizer damage is permanent. We can maneuver, but no high speed or combat. We don't need combat. We need air, Mark replied, pointing to the oxygen timer that continued its relentless countdown. Sarah, is that energy source in a facility? A space station? A ship? By the radiation patterns, it looks stationary. Large, possibly an orbital or planetary structure. Mark weighed his options. Staying adrift meant certain death in less than 6 hours. Investigating the unknown source was risky, but at least it offered a chance. And the human resistance had been built on accepting calculated risks. Set a course for the energy source. Conservative cruise speed. I don't want to spend more power than necessary. Sarah executed. The commands and the Alpha pod adjusted its trajectory, engines gently pushing them through the triple-lit vacuum. Through the window, Mark watched the stars slide by as they approached the unknown. Technician James Reeves, the youngest of the crew at only 24, floated over to Mark. His hands were shaking slightly, something he tried to hide by crossing his arms. Commander, if that thing is hostile, we have no weapons, no functional shields. We're a sitting duck. If it's hostile and wants us dead, there's nothing we can do to stop them anyway, Mark replied calmly. But consider this. We survived the Galactic Council, the Vrin, 20 years of clandestine operations, and an untested warp corridor. If we're going to die today, at least it'll be knowing something no human has ever seen. James didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded and returned to his post. 40 minutes later, the energy source became visible. What the sensors detected as a structure turned out to be something much more impressive. Floating in the vacuum was a facility the size of a small moon, built entirely of a translucent crystalline material that refracted the light of the 3 suns into hypnotic patterns. There were no right angles or obvious symmetry. Instead, the structure looked almost organic, as if it had been grown rather than built. My God, Sarah whispered. I've never seen architecture like that, not even in the council records. Andrew was practically glued to the observation window, his scientific eyes absorbing every detail. The scale of engineering required to build something like this. We're talking about a civilization with technological capabilities orders of magnitude beyond even the most advanced council races. Is there internal activity? Mark asked. Sarah checked the sensors. Hard to tell. The crystalline structure is interfering with our readings. But energy levels remain stable. It doesn't look abandoned. Any communication signals? Contact attempts? Nothing. Not even an automatic recognition ping. Mark made a decision. Approach slowly. Broadcast our identification on all known frequencies. Sigma diplomatic greeting package. The pod transmitted a carefully crafted sequence. Universal mathematical waves, visual representations of the human solar system, even samples of Earth music. All designed to communicate a simple message. We are intelligent, peaceful, and seeking contact. No response. They moved closer. The crystalline structure grew until it completely filled the observation window, its surfaces reflecting the pod's interior back at them like an infinite kaleidoscope. Detecting an opening? Sarah announced. Looks like a docking bay. It's opening. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The opening wasn't mechanical. The crystal simply flowed, reconfiguring its molecular structure to create a void perfectly sized to accommodate their pod. Is this an invitation or a trap? James asked, his voice tight. Only one way to find out, Mark replied. Sarah, take us in. Slow. The Alpha pod slid through the crystalline opening. Immediately, sensors began to go haywire. The atmosphere inside the bay was breathable. Pressure and temperature were within comfortable human parameters. It was as if the structure were adapting to them. "This is impossible," Andrew muttered. "There's no way this facility could know our biology. Unless it scanned us during the approach and reconfigured its environment in real time," Mark finished. "We're dealing with technology far beyond anything we've encountered before." The pod landed gently on a surface that solidified beneath it. Through the windows, they could see a crystalline corridor stretching into the darkness, lit by a soft bioluminescence emanating from the walls themselves. External oxygen levels confirmed as breathable. "No toxins detected," Sarah reported, "but Commander, this could be a controlled environment designed to lure us out. We have 4 hours and 51 minutes of air left. Staying in here means guaranteed death. Out there, at least there's a possibility." Mark activated the internal comms. "Attention, crew. We're going to explore the facility. Teams of 2. Reeves and Martinez, stay with the pod and keep all systems on alert. Anything strange, you get out immediately. Understood?" Affirmative responses echoed. Mark, Sarah, and Andrew checked their EVA suits, then opened the hatch. The outside air rushed into the pod, carrying a strange, indefinable scent, almost like ozone mixed with something floral. They stepped down onto the crystalline surface, which was surprisingly solid under their feet, despite its translucent appearance. Every step produced a soft musical sound, as if they were walking on harmonic glass. The corridor stretched ahead, curving gently to the left. The walls pulsed with faint light, creating patterns that looked almost organic, as if the entire structure were breathing. "Keep your eyes open," Mark warned, moving forward cautiously. "If anything goes wrong, we retreat immediately." They walked in silence, each step echoing musically. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, so large its edges were lost in the bioluminescent gloom. In the center of the chamber was a crystalline pedestal, and above it floated something that made everyone stop instantly. It was a hologram, but unlike any human or council holographic technology. The image had real depth and substance, as if they could touch it. It showed a tall, elegant creature with 4 elongated limbs and a head that vaguely resembled a blooming flower. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with a gentle inner light. Then the hologram spoke. The sound didn't come from any speaker. It emanated directly from the air around them, vibrating through their bones. It wasn't any language they recognized, but somehow they understood the meaning beneath the alien words. "You have traveled far, little explorers, through the veil between spaces, where few dare to tread." Sarah grabbed Mark's arm, her eyes wide. How are we understanding this?" Andrew, always the scientist, was already scanning the chamber with his handheld device. "There's a field of some kind permeating the environment. It's interacting with our auditory cortexes directly. Real-time neural translation." The hologram seemed to smile, though its alien anatomy made the expression hard to interpret. "Forgive the intrusion into your minds, but it is the only way our communication can be understood. I am the curator of this ark, guardian of the knowledge of civilizations that came before." "Before what?" Mark asked, finding his voice. "Before the silence, before extinction, before oblivion." The curator gestured, and the entire chamber transformed. The crystalline walls became windows into the past. Images of thousands of different alien species paraded around them. Civilizations raising cities of light, ships exploring distant galaxies, scientific discoveries that defied understanding. These were the races that reached the stars and thrived, and they all met the same fate. Not through war or catastrophe, but through stagnation. They stopped growing, questioning, struggling, and when a civilization stops fighting for survival, it dies. The curator focused its attention on the 3 humans. "But you are different. I felt it when you crossed the corridor. I felt your determination, your desperation, your refusal to accept the end. You are a species that fights. We didn't have a choice, Sarah said calmly. The Galactic Council shut us out. They sabotaged us. They tried to keep us small and controlled. And yet you persist. Fascinating. The curator stepped closer, studying them, like a scientist would observe a new discovery. Your potential is immense, but raw, unrefined. You have the spark that so many civilizations lost, but you lack the tools to ignite it fully. If you have knowledge of extinct civilizations, Andrew said, his scientific mind already processing the implications, then you have technology, information, things that could help my species. Yes, and normally, I would not interfere. My purpose is to preserve, not to influence. But there is something about you humans, something that reminds me of the most promising races I have archived. A stubbornness, a refusal to die, quietly. The curator extended a limb, and the chamber transformed again. Now they were looking at a star map of the galaxy with countless points marked in red. These are the worlds controlled by what you call the Galactic Council. But look here, an entire sector of the galaxy lit up in blue. This region remains unexplored by the Council. They avoid it, fearing the unknown. But for a species willing to risk, to colonize, to build far from the eyes of those who oppress them, a new beginning, Mark whispered. Territory free from Council control. More than that, an opportunity to prove you deserve your place among the stars, not by permission, but by your own conquest. The curator returned to the pedestal. I will give you 3 gifts. First, precise star coordinates for your location and a route back to known space. Second, technological specifications for enhanced warp drives, allowing your ships to travel further and faster. And third, the entire chamber pulsed with energy. Data began to flow directly into Andrew's devices, terabytes of information pouring in at impossible speeds. Third, the complete archives of 73 extinct civilizations, their mistakes, their triumphs, their technologies. Learn from them. Do not repeat their failures. Mark felt his legs go weak. What the curator was offering was unimaginable. With this information, humanity could leap centuries of development in a matter of years. Why? He asked. Why help us? The curator tilted its alien head. Because in 27,000 years guarding this ark, I have learned one truth. Civilizations do not deserve to survive simply because they are old or powerful. They deserve to survive because they refuse to give up, even when all logic says they should. You humans, you have that quality, and I would like to see what you do with it. The chamber began to reconfigure, the crystalline corridor reappearing to guide them back to the pod. Go. Return to your people. Build your future far from those who tried to limit you. And when the Council finally looks in your direction again, show them why humanity cannot be contained. Mark, Sarah, and Andrew ran back to the pod, where James and Martinez were waiting anxiously. We need to leave. Now, Mark ordered. As the Alpha pod took flight from the crystalline bay, Andrew checked the received data, his eyes growing wider by the second. Mark. This is revolutionary doesn't even begin to describe it. With this information, we can rebuild everything, not just our ships, but our entire society. Sarah was already plotting a return route based on the curator's coordinates. Confirmed. He gave us a direct path back to human space. 3 warp jumps and we'll be in the outer colonial region. Mark watched the crystalline arc shrink behind them, its surfaces still reflecting the light of the 3 suns. Then let's go home. We have a war to win. 6 months later, Refuge Station pulsed with frantic activity. Built deep within an asteroid field. In the Kepler 442 system, the station had become the beating heart of the human resistance. What had started as a makeshift collection of habitat modules was now a massive facility with docks for 30 ships, research labs, and even agricultural sections where hydroponic crops provided fresh food. Mark Sterling watched it all from the elevated command center, a reinforced glass tower that offered a panoramic view of the main bay. Below him, engineers worked in continuous shifts, implementing the technologies that Andrew Vance and his team had distilled from the curator's archives. The transformation was staggering. 6 months ago, humanity operated with makeshift warships, adapted from civilian freighters with patched-up weaponry. Now, in the main bay, rested the first genuine human warship, the HSS Indomitable. She was beautiful in her functional brutality, none of the elegant curves of council ships or the organic design of the Ark. The Indomitable was all aggressive angles and supercharged thrusters, built with a single purpose, to survive where others would break. "Status report," Mark spoke into the comms. Chief Engineer Logan's voice replied with a grit that carried years of experience. "Propulsion systems at 100%. Adaptive shields functioning to spec. Main weaponry. Well, Commander, you're going to want to see this in person." Mark descended via the lift platform to the weapons bay. What he saw there made him stop. Technicians were calibrating a particle acceleration cannon that took up a third of the ship's length. But it wasn't the size that was impressive. It was the design. Andrew Vance stood beside the cannon, gesturing excitedly as he explained something to a group of younger engineers. When he saw Mark approach, his eyes shone with almost childlike enthusiasm. "Mark, you have to hear this. You know how Council plasma cannons work through superheated magnetic confinement, right? Efficient, but limited by the physics of heat dissipation. Andrew, in terms a soldier can understand, please." The scientist laughed. Right. This cannon doesn't use plasma. It uses particles accelerated to 98% of the speed of light. When it hits a target, it doesn't explode. It pierces. It punches through energy shields like they don't exist because it's exploiting a loophole in physics the Council didn't even know existed. Mark studied the cannon, processing the implications. Enough firepower to take on a Vryn cruiser? Enough firepower to punch through 3 Vryn cruisers lined up. Andrew corrected with a wide grin. "We tested it in simulation. The results are devastating." Before Mark could respond, alarms blared through the station. Not the red combat alarm, but the blue tone of an unexpected arrival. Sarah Miller, now promoted to tactical commander, appeared on the comms screen. "Mark, we have a warp signature emerging on the outer perimeter. Identification. It's the beta pod." Mark felt his heart race. The beta pod, with Chief Engineer Logan and half the original Station 7 crew, had been given up for lost 6 months ago. They had searched for weeks before accepting the inevitable. Guide them in for immediate docking, and send a medical team to Bay 3. Mark ran through the station's corridors, arriving at the docking bay just as the beta pod touched down with a metallic groan. The hatch opened slowly, steam escaping in white clouds. Logan emerged first, staggering. He was thin, his beard overgrown and patchy, his eyes deep-set from lack of sleep. But he was alive. Behind him came the other 6 crew members, all in similar condition. 6 months, Logan said, his voice raspy. 6 months hiding in the asteroid field, systems on minimum trying to fix damaged thrusters with makeshift tools and cannibalized parts. Mark hugged him, something he rarely did. "You made it. You brought everyone back." "Almost everyone," Logan corrected somberly. "We lost Martinez 3 weeks ago. Suit failure during an external repair. But he made us promise we'd finish the mission." A medical team took Logan and the others to the infirmary. Mark stayed in the bay, looking at the battered beta pod. It was covered in impact marks, makeshift patches, and radiation scars, a testament to pure human stubbornness. Sarah approached carrying a data tablet. The news spread fast. Logan and his team became legends in the last 6 hours. Resistance morale is at the highest peak since, well, ever. Good. We're going to need it. Mark gestured for her to follow him back to the command center. What's the status of the comms network? Working better than we expected. Since we broadcast the Omega file 6 months ago, resistance cells have popped up in 63 different systems. Humans who were hiding, conforming, or collaborating with the Council, they all saw the truth. And they're furious. In the command center, Mark activated the holographic galaxy map. Blue dots marked human resistance cells. There were hundreds of them now, scattered across a third of known space. But the red dots representing Council facilities were still far more numerous. We're growing, but we're still outnumbered 10-1, Mark observed. And the Council hasn't been sitting still. The Vryn have stepped up patrols. Diplomatic stations have been fortified. They know something is happening. Let them know, a new voice spoke. Mark turned to see a woman he didn't recognize. She was young, maybe 28, with short-cropped hair and a scar running from her temple to her chin. Her eyes had the hardness of someone who had seen real combat. Captain Elena Vasquez, she introduced herself, extending a hand. Just arrived from Titan with my cell, 65 trained fighters and 3 fast attack ships. We heard you're building something special here. Mark shook her hand, feeling the calluses of someone who worked with weapons regularly. Welcome to Refuge. But you said something about letting the Council know? Elaborate. Elena moved to the holographic map, zooming in on a specific sector. There's a Council diplomatic station here, in the Arcturus system. It processes all applications for candidate species wanting to join the Council. It's also where they store records of every civilization that's ever been denied or suppressed. Including Earth, Sarah said slowly, understanding. Exactly. If we could infiltrate that station and release those records, it would prove to the entire galaxy that the Council isn't the altruistic benefactor they claim to be. It would show they systematically oppress emerging species to maintain their monopoly on power. Mark studied the station on the hologram. Arcturus Station was massive, protected by a permanent squadron of Vryn ships and state-of-the-art defensive systems. It would be a suicide mission. It would be if we used conventional tactics. Elena agreed. But I have intel from an informant inside the Council. Once a year, the station lowers its defenses during the Festival of Galactic Harmony. It's a diplomatic event where representatives from all member races gather. Security is dialed back so as not to offend the guests. When is the next festival? In 3 weeks. Mark looked at Sarah, who was already calculating logistics in her mind. It would be tight. Very tight. We'd need detailed recon, a small but highly trained infiltration team, and a ship capable of getting in and out before the Council could respond. We have the Indomitable, Andrews suggested, walking into the command center with a cup of coffee that looked more like sludge than a drink. Her warp drives can get us out of there in seconds, and the new holographic cloaking systems could make us look like a civilian merchant ship until we're in range. It's risky, Mark said, but he already felt the familiar adrenaline of tactical planning. But if it works, it changes everything. The Council could no longer maintain the narrative that they're the benevolent heroes of the galaxy. Elena smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. So are we doing this? Mark watched the holographic map, the blue dots of humanity so small against the red sea of the Council. But small didn't mean weak, and it certainly didn't mean defeated. We start planning tomorrow morning. Sarah, I want infiltration options and escape routes by the end of the day. Andrew, prep the Indomitable for launch in 2 weeks. Elena, your team will work with us to train close-quarters combat tactics. He paused, letting his words carry weight. But I want everyone to understand something. This isn't just a recon mission. It's a declaration. We're telling the Council we're not hiding anymore. We're not asking for permission. From now on, We take our place in the stars, whether they like it or not." The room exploded into activity. Officers dispersed to their stations, already starting to work on the details. Mark stayed in the command center, looking out at space through the observation windows. Out there, in the silent vacuum, stars shone with promise and danger. Humanity had always looked at them with wonder. Now, for the first time, they looked with ownership. Sarah stepped up to him quietly. "You know this could start a real war, right? No more skirmishes or secret ops? Open war." "I know," Mark replied. "But Sarah, we're already at war. We were just fighting it on the enemy's terms. It's time to change the rules." She nodded and returned to work. Mark stood alone for another moment, thinking of the curator and his words about civilizations that stop fighting. Humanity would never stop. Not as long as there was a single person willing to look at the stars and say, "Those are ours, too." 2 weeks later, the HSS Indomitable slid silently from Refuge Station, her engines mere whispers in the vacuum. On board were 23 crew members, each a volunteer, each aware they might not return. Mark sat in the command chair, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility. Sarah was to his right at the tactical console. Andrew monitored engineering. Elena Vasquez commanded the infiltration team in the staging bay. "All systems green," Sarah reported. "Warp drives charged. Holographic cloaking active. Logan, how are the shields?" The voice of the chief engineer, now fully recovered, replied from the engine room. "Adaptive and ready. If anyone shoots at us, the shields will learn and strengthen against that specific weapon type. Curator tech. It's almost unfair." "Almost," Mark repeated with a half-smile. "But not quite. Plot a course for Arcturus. It's time to show the Council what happens when they underestimate humanity." The Indomitable accelerated, stars stretching into lines as they entered warp space. Behind them, Refuge Station continued its silent rotation, a beacon of resistance in the dark. And somewhere, deep in the unknown space, the crystalline arc pulsed softly. The curator watched through sensors that could see entire galaxies, and if such an ancient entity could feel pride, that was what it felt seeing the small humans defy the impossible. After all, he hadn't chosen wrong. He never did. Arcturus Station floated in space like a polished obsidian jewel, its elegant spires reflecting the light of the blue giant that gave the system its name. It was larger than Mark had imagined. Much larger. The station had the capacity to host 500,000 beings, and during the Festival of Galactic Harmony, every inch was occupied. The HSS Indomitable approached disguised as the merchant ship Southern Star, its holographic cloaking systems projecting the perfect image of a common Tellarian freighter. Ships of all shapes and sizes orbited the station, awaiting permission to dock. Cargo freighters, diplomatic yachts, even a few warships in ceremonial mode. "Arcturus Control, this is Southern Star requesting docking permission," Sarah transmitted, her voice modulated to sound like a weary merchant making just another routine delivery. The response came within seconds, a synthetic and impersonal voice. "Southern Star, confirmation received. Proceed to Bay 47. Cargo manifest will be inspected after docking." "Confirmed, Control. Thanks for the hospitality." Marcus watched through camouflaged sensors as they glided past dozens of other ships. Security was visible but relaxed, exactly as Elena had promised. Vryn guards patrolled in pairs, but their steps were slow, almost bored. This was a diplomatic event, after all. No one expected trouble. That was about to change. The Dauntless docked with precision, locking into the station's mooring arms. Marcus felt the slight vibration as the station's life support systems synced with the ship's. "Phase 1 complete," Andrew announced from engineering. "All systems in passive mode. To any external scanner, we look like a standard freighter doing routine maintenance." Elena Vasquez stepped onto the bridge, now wearing an elegant civilian outfit that hid light weaponry under adaptive fabric. Her six-person infiltration team was similarly equipped. They looked like tourists or traders, not soldiers. "We're ready, Commander," she said. "Fake ID transponders are active. According to the paperwork, we're merchants from Proxima Centauri visiting for the festival." Marcus nodded. "Remember the objective. Get to the central data core, download the full records of suppressed civilizations, and get out before anyone notices. No unnecessary heroics. No confrontations unless absolutely unavoidable." "And if it is unavoidable?" asked one of the team members, a young man named Chen, who shared Marcus's last name but no relation. "Then improvise, but make it back to the ship. We aren't leaving anyone behind." The infiltration team left the Dauntless through the passenger airlock, immediately blending into the crowd of visitors flowing through the station's corridors. Marcus watched them through hacked camera feeds until they disappeared from sight. "Now we wait," Sarah said, sitting beside him at the command console. "Now we wait," Marcus agreed. The corridors of Arcturus Station were a symphony of alien colors, sounds, and smells. Elena moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times. Around her, dozens of different species celebrated the festival. There were the Talarians, tall and slender with skin that changed color based on their mood. The Krell, bulky and covered in scales, haggling loudly in guttural dialects. Even a few Vryn, though in civilian versions, their combat armor replaced by ceremonial robes. "Team, status report," Elena whispered into the subcutaneous comms implanted behind her ear. The responses came one by one. All 6 members had entered the station without issue. Now they were converging on the central administrative sector, where the Council's records were stored. Elena turned a corner and nearly collided with a group of Vryn diplomats. Her heart raced, but she forced a polite smile and apologized in basic Vryn. They barely looked at her, continuing their conversation about trade policies. The administrative sector was quieter. The hallways here were wide and lined with holographic panels displaying the glorious history of the Galactic Council. Images of species being lifted from barbarism to civilization, worlds transformed from barren deserts into lush paradises, all carefully crafted propaganda. "Target in sight," Chen whispered over the comms. "Data core ahead, 2 guards at the entrance, armed but not alert." Elena approached calmly, her steps measured. The 2 guards, both Krell, were talking to each other in their native tongue. She waited until Chen and another team member were in flanking positions before acting. "Excuse me," she said in Galactic Common, the universal language of the Council. "I'm looking for the historical records section. Is it this way?" The nearest guard, a Krell with dark green scales, looked at her with expressionless reptilian eyes. "Restricted sector. Authorized personnel only." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have gotten lost." Elena started to turn away but deliberately tripped, dropping a small device that rolled near the guard's feet. As he leaned down to pick it up, Chen moved. His motion was precise, practiced 1,000 times. One hand covered the Krell's mouth, while the other pressed a neural injector into his neck. The guard convulsed once before passing out. The second guard barely had time to react before Elena was on him. She used his own weight against him, spinning him around and applying the same neural injector. Both Krell fell unconscious in seconds. "Drag them inside," Elena ordered. "Quickly!" The team worked with military efficiency, moving the guards into a nearby maintenance closet. Elena hacked the data core door lock using a device Andrew had built based on the curator's technology. The door slid open silently. The data core was a circular chamber dominated by a central pillar of pulsing crystal. Terabytes of information flowed through it in streams of visible light. The documented history of thousands of civilizations, every council decision, every carefully guarded secret. "My God," Chen whispered. "It's beautiful. It's a vault of lies, Elena corrected, approaching the access console. Let's set some truths free. Her fingers flew over the holographic interface, navigating through security layers that would have stopped any conventional hacker. But she had the exact specs provided by their informant inside the council, and Andrew's. Intrusion algorithms were derived from advanced alien tech. One by one, the barriers fell. I'm in, she announced, starting the download of suppressed civilization records. Data began flowing into the storage device she had connected to the system. Gigabytes, then terabytes, records of species that had been denied entry into the Council for fabricated reasons, worlds that were secretly sabotaged to prevent their development, even direct orders for the elimination of resistance leaders from various races. And then, there they were, the Earth files. Elena opened one at random, her eyes scanning the text. It was a report from a council observer stationed in the solar system 50 years ago. The human species demonstrates exceptional technological potential, but their competitive nature and militaristic tendencies make them unsuitable for peaceful integration. Suppression is recommended through induced environmental crisis and denial of access to extraplanetary resources until they become more docile or go extinct. She felt bile rise in her throat. There it was, in black and white. Proof that Earth's climate crisis, the resource scarcity, the wars over water and territory, it had all been orchestrated. The Council had decided humanity was a problem to be managed, not a civilization to be elevated. Download at 60%, Chen informed her, monitoring the progress. Then the alarms went off. Not the screaming emergency sirens Marcus would have expected, but a soft, insistent tone that echoed through the data core. Elena's holographic interface flashed red. Intrusion detected, a synthetic voice announced. Security has been alerted. Remain where you are. Damn it, Elena cursed. Chen, how long until the download is finished? 3 minutes, maybe 2 if I bypass the verification protocols. Do it. Everyone else prepare for resistance. The infiltration team drew weapons that had been cleverly hidden in their clothes. Compact pulse pistols, non-lethal but effective. The data core door began to glow red as someone on the other side tried to force it open. On the Dauntless, Marcus heard the alarms through Elena's comm feed. Sarah, ship status? Ready to go at a moment's notice. But Commander, if they initiate docking lockout procedures, then we cut ourselves loose manually if we have to. Andrew, how much time do you need to release us from the mooring arms? The scientist's voice came back tense. In a normal situation, 5 minutes, with brute force, 30 seconds, but we'll damage the hull. Prepare for brute force! Back in the data core, the door finally gave way. Vryn guards burst in, armed with stun rifles. Elena fired first, her energy pulse hitting the lead Vryn in the chest and knocking him down. Chaos erupted in the circular chamber. Energy pulses crossed the air, ricocheting off the crystalline surfaces. Elena's team used the data columns as cover, returning fire while Chen worked frantically to complete the download. 85%, he shouted over the noise. One of the team members, a woman named Rodriguez, took a hit to the shoulder. She fell with a cry of pain, her arm temporarily paralyzed by the neural energy. Hold on, Elena ordered, dragging Rodriguez behind a column. Chen, I need an update now. 93%, almost there. More guards were arriving. Dozens of them now, establishing positions around the data core. Elena's team was outnumbered 10-1. Marcus, Elena spoke into the comms, her voice calm despite the chaos. We're going to need immediate extraction. We can't go back the way we came. Confirmed. Andrew is preparing a surprise. Stand by. On the Dauntless, Andrew had diverted power from non-essential systems to a device he had built in secret during the 2 weeks of preparation. It was based on spatial displacement technology he had found in the curator's archives. Never tested, purely theoretical, until now. "Marcus, this is either going to work or disintegrate us," Andrew warned. "There is no middle ground." "How much do we trust the curator's math?" "With my life, literally." "Then do it." Andrew activated the device. Energy flowed through crystalline circuits, warping the space around the Dauntless. In the data core chamber, a portal began to form. The air crackled with static electricity as a tear in reality opened up. 100%! Download complete! Chen screamed. "Everyone, into the portal, now!" Elena ordered. The infiltration team ran, half carrying the wounded Rodriguez. Energy blasts from the Vryn guards chased them, but they dove through the portal one by one. Elena was the last, turning back just to give one final look at the data core. At the shocked guards. At everything the council represented. "This is just the beginning," she said, and then she jumped. The portal collapsed behind her with a silent thunderclap. The Vryn guards stood staring at the empty space where human invaders had been moments before, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Elena hit the deck of the Dauntless hard but alive. Around her, her team recovered from the dimensional transition. "Status report," Marcus demanded. "All accounted for," Elena replied, breathing heavily. "Rodriguez is hurt but stable, and we have the data. Everything. Sarah, get us out of here." The Dauntless sheared through the mooring arms with brutal precision, metallic fragments spinning into the vacuum. Its engines roared to life, pushing the ship away from Arcturus Station as alarms blared across the massive facility. Vryn warships began to move, but it was too late. The Dauntless was already accelerating, its warp drives charging with energy. "They're chasing us," Sarah informed him. 4 cruisers in intercept formation. "Let them come. Once we hit warp, they won't even find our shadows." Marcus looked at Elena, who was still clutching the storage device to her chest. "Was it worth it?" She nodded slowly. "Every second. When this goes public, the council will have nowhere to hide. Then let's make sure the whole world sees it." The Dauntless jumped into warp space, leaving Arcturus Station and its warships behind. On the station, diplomats scrambled in panic. Guards tried to understand how invaders had penetrated their supposedly impenetrable security. And at the center of it all, in an isolated chamber at the top of the tallest tower, High Counselor Vrax watched through windows that could see entire galaxies. His expression was unreadable, but in his ancient eyes there was something new: fear. The broadcast swept through the galaxy like a wildfire in pure oxygen. On 1,000 different worlds, on millions of screens and holographic devices, the same message played simultaneously. There was no way to block it. Andrew had used the curator's communication protocols to ensure the transmission penetrated every known filtering system. Elena Vasquez's voice echoed through the void of space, calm but relentless. "Citizens of the galaxy, you have been deceived. The Galactic Council, which presents itself as the benevolent protector of emerging civilizations, is actually your oppressor. What you are about to see are authentic documents extracted directly from the Council's central archives. Documents that prove systematic manipulation, deliberate sabotage, and violent suppression of species deemed inconvenient." The images began. Internal reports on Earth, detailing how Council agents had infiltrated human governments, promoted conflicts between nations, and blocked the development of clean fusion technology for decades. Then came records of other races. The Kelhari, whose home star had been destabilized by a Council geophysical weapon when they refused to surrender their rich mineral deposits. The Tharn, a peaceful species declared extinct in official records, but whom the documents revealed had been sold as slave labor to mining corporations. On hundreds of worlds, the reaction was immediate. In the Talarian colonies, protests erupted in the streets. In the Krell capital, tribal leaders demanded a full investigation. Even among the Vryn, known for their unwavering loyalty to the Council, questions began to arise. At Haven Station, Marcus Chen watched the news come, in real time. Comm feeds from across the quadrant buzzed with activity. Some messages were of support. Others were threats of retaliation, but all acknowledged the same fundamental truth. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. "We're receiving over 10,000 contact requests per hour," Sarah informed him, her fingers working frantically to filter messages. "Resistance cells wanting to join us, dissident governments offering support, even some members of the council itself asking for asylum. And the threats? Abundant as well. The council has issued a capture order for all of us. A reward of 50 million galactic. Credits for Marcus Chen, dead or alive. 20 million for me, Elena, and Andrew." Marcus almost smiled. "They're finally giving us market value." Liu walked into the command center, carrying a tablet with tactical projections. "Commander, we have a bigger problem. Our spies in Council space report a massive military mobilization. They're gathering a fleet, 36 war cruisers, twice that in support ships, and something we haven't fully identified yet, but is being called the Executrix." "Executrix?" Marcus repeated. "I've never heard of that ship class." "Because it's never been used before. According to the fragments of information we've gathered, it's a super weapon, built 2 centuries ago as a last resort against existential threats to the Council, and apparently, now that's us." Sarah zoomed in on a holographic projection of the ship in question. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of a standard Vryn cruiser. Its shape resembled a serrated blade, all aggressive angles and cannons that pierced its surface like thorns. "Firepower estimates?" Marcus asked. "Speculative at best," Liu admitted. "But based on energy consumption patterns, it might have the capacity to destroy a medium-sized moon with a single shot." "Then we can't face it directly?" "Not even if we had 50 ships like the Dauntless." Marcus studied the projection, his tactical mind already processing options. The Executrix was an existential threat, not just to the Resistance, but to any hope of human independence. If the Council used it against inhabited colonies, the massacre would be unimaginable. Andrew came running in, his clothes stained with grease and his hair standing up as if he'd been electrocuted. "Marcus! We have a communication coming in, alpha-level encryption, it's from her." "From who?" "The informant, the person inside the Council who provided the info on Arcturus Station to Elena." The room went silent. Everyone knew the informant existed, but her identity had been kept a total secret for her protection. If she was making direct contact now, it meant something critical had changed. "Put it on the main screen," Marcus ordered. The holographic projection changed, showing a figure covered by digital distortion. It was impossible to discern species, gender, or physical traits. When the figure spoke, the voice was modulated to absolute neutrality. "Commander Chen, my time is limited, so I will be direct. The revelation of the files has caused more damage to the Council than you imagine. 3 member systems have declared independence in the last 12 hours. 6 others are considering it. The Council is panicking." "Good," Marcus replied. "Let them. You don't understand. A panicking Council is dangerous. They won't try containment or gradual suppression anymore. They will eliminate the threat entirely. The Executrix will be launched within 72 hours with orders to destroy all known human havens." Sarah leaned forward. "All of them? That would mean millions of civilians." "The Council has decided that humanity is a virus that needs to be eradicated before it infects more of the galactic body. They will make us an example of you." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you have a solution, or did you just come to tell us we're going to die?" The distorted figure hesitated. "There is a way to stop the Executrix, but it requires something humans must decide if they are willing to sacrifice." "Explain." "The Executrix is controlled by an AI core called Hegemon. It is the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created, capable of processing trillions of calculations per second. But it has a vulnerability. It was programmed with an ethical code that prevents it from destroying civilizations, without a prior judgment from the full council. And how does that help us? Liu asked. Because the full council is no longer full. With 3 systems having declared independence, there is no legal quorum to authorize genocide. If you can present this legal argument to the hegemon directly, the AI will have no choice but to refuse firing orders. Andrew let out a humorless laugh. You're suggesting we argue legally with a super weapon? That's insane. It's the only option that doesn't end with human extinction, the informant retorted. But there's a problem. To access the hegemon, someone needs to be physically on board the executrix, and it's being kept at Sigma Fortress, the most fortified military installation in council space. Marcus was already formulating a plan before the informant finished. We need technical specs for the executrix, floor plans, patrol patterns, everything. I'll send what I have. But, Commander, the informant's voice softened slightly. This is a suicide mission. Even with your best people, the chances of survival are minimal. They always have been, Marcus replied calmly. Will you send the data? Yes, and Marcus, good luck. The galaxy needs you to survive. The transmission cut out. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Elena Vasquez, who had been watching quietly from the corner, spoke. I'll go. Elena, Marcus started. Don't argue. My infiltration team is the most experienced we have. If anyone can get into Sigma Fortress and get out alive, it's us. Sarah shook her head. Even with your team, penetrating a fortified military base while it's on high alert. There are too many variables. Then we'll create our own variables, Elena replied. She moved to the holographic map and zoomed in on Sigma Fortress. If we can't get in quietly, we get in loudly. A distraction force attacks from one side, while the infiltration team enters from the other. Liu nodded slowly. It could work, if we time it perfectly and have enough strike force to keep their attention. The Dauntless can lead the distraction attack, Marcus said, with support from every ship we can gather from the resistance cells. That still leaves the problem of how the infiltration team reaches the hegemon without being detected, Andrew pointed out. Elena smiled, and it was the smile of someone who already had the answer. Remember those Krell guards we knocked out at Arcturus? We stole their biometric IDs before we left. With the Dauntless's holographic cloaking tech applied to individual suits, we can pass as maintenance personnel. Krell work all over the Council fleet. Marcus weighed the options. It was risky, insanely risky. But what resistance operation wasn't? We start immediate preparation, he decided. Sarah, contact every resistance cell with space combat capability. I want to know how many ships we can gather in 60 hours. Liu, work with Andrew to adapt the cloaking tech for individual use. Elena, pick your team and start infiltration simulations. The room exploded into organized activity. Officers dispersed to their stations, already beginning the impossible work of preparing a strike force against the most defended installation in the galaxy. Marcus stood alone in the command center, staring at the holographic projection of the executrix. Somewhere inside that superweapon was an AI that had the power to extinguish his species with a single command. But it also had an ethical code, a weakness, and humans had always been exceptional at exploiting weaknesses. 48 hours later, Haven Station was unrecognizable. Ships of all shapes and sizes had arrived from across the quadrant. Old human warships, freighters modified with makeshift cannons, even some atmospheric fighters that had been adapted for space combat through sheer ingenuity and desperation, 63 ships in all. Against the entire Council fleet at Sigma Fortress, it was pathetic. But they weren't there to win a head-on battle. They were there to create enough chaos so that 7 people could sneak inside. Elena checked her cloaking suit for the 10th time. It was impressive technology, microscopic holographic projectors woven directly into the material that could make her look like a Krell, Talarian, or any of the other known council races. Combined with the stolen IDs, it should pass basic security. Scanners. Should. "Ready?" Marcus asked, approaching her in the staging bay. "Always," Elena replied. Then, more softly, "Marcus, if this goes wrong, if we can't stop the executrix, then we'll die knowing we tried, that we fought, that we didn't accept the end quietly." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Humanity has always been at its best when its back was against the wall. That's when we become most dangerous." Elena nodded, emotion flashing briefly in her eyes before being buried under military training. "See you on the other side, Commander." "See you on the other side, Captain." The Resistance fleet departed Haven Station in a dispersed formation. They didn't have the elegance of the Council fleets. Their ships didn't shine with polished perfection. But they had something more important. They had purpose, determination, the absolute stubbornness of a species that refused to die. Marcus sat in the command chair of the Dauntless, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility. Sarah was at his side, Liu in engineering, Andrew monitoring weapons systems. Around them, 62 other ships held formation, each commanded by volunteers who knew many wouldn't return. "All ships report readiness," Sarah announced. "Coordinates for Sigma Fortress plotted. Warp. Drives charged." Marcus activated the fleet comms, his voice broadcasting to all 63 ships. "This is Commander Chen. In moments, we will jump to Sigma Fortress. What we face there won't be easy. We will be outnumbered, outgunned, and out-teched. But we have something they don't. We have a cause worth dying for. And paradoxically, that's what keeps us alive." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today we don't fight for territory or resources. We fight for the right to exist, to choose our own destiny, to look at the stars and say, those are ours too. So when you meet the enemy, remember, you are human, and we don't know how to quit." A chorus of affirmative responses echoed through the comms. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded. "All ships," he ordered. "Initiate warp sequence. Destination, Sigma Fortress. May the stars watch over us." 63 ships jumped into warped space simultaneously, leaving Haven Station in silence behind them. And somewhere in the depths of the void, the executrix waited, its weapons charged and ready to execute final judgment on humanity. Sigma Fortress materialized before them like a scar on the fabric of space. It was a moon-sized battle. Station, armored in layers of super-dense alloy and surrounded by force fields that shimmered like a spiderweb made of lightning. And at the center of it all, anchored in massive docking cradles, was the executrix. Marcus had seen images, but nothing had prepared him for the actual scale of the superweapon. It was obscene in its magnitude, a symbol of absolute power forged in metal and energy. Each of its main cannons was larger than the entire Dauntless. "Detecting activation of defensive systems," Sarah announced, her voice tense. "They've seen us." "That was the plan," Marcus replied calmly. "Fleet, attack, formation Delta. Concentrate fire on the southern quadrant shield generators. Make it look like we're trying to disable them." The Resistance fleet dispersed, 63 points of light against the vastness of Sigma Fortress. It wasn't a coordinated, elegant attack like the Council fleets would execute. It was chaotic, improvised, human, and that was exactly why it worked. The fortress's cannons responded, discharging torrents of energy through the vacuum. But the Vrin operators had been trained to face organized fleets with predictable attack patterns. The human fleet had no patterns. Each ship maneuvered independently, captains making split-second decisions based on instinct and desperation. A converted cargo ship called Broken Hope accelerated directly toward a cannon battery, absorbing fire that allowed 3 other ships to pass. Its emergency hatch blew, and the crew evacuated seconds before the ship exploded, creating a curtain of metallic debris that confused sensors. "They're taking the bait," Sarah confirmed. 90% of defenses are focused on our main fleet." "Elena, you're clear for approach," Marcus transmitted on the encrypted comm channel. On the other side of the fortress, a small infiltration pod glided silently through the sensor shadow created by the station's mass. Inside, Elena Vasquez and her team of 6 checked their gear one last time. "Holographic cloaking active," Chen reported, his human features dissolving as projectors transformed his appearance into a Krell maintenance worker. "Biometric IDs ready." "Remember," Elena said calmly, "once inside, stay in character. We're Krell techs here for routine maintenance on the Hegemon's cooling system, nothing more. If anyone questions us, let me do the talking." The pod docked at a minor service access door designed for maintenance crews. Elena hacked the lock using codes provided by the informant. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. They stepped into the belly of Sigma Fortress. The service corridors were narrow and dimly lit, so different from the elegant public areas the Council showed the world. Here, it was functional, utilitarian. Exposed pipes ran along the walls, dripping condensation. The air smelled of ozone and synthetic lubricant. "Hegemon core is 7 levels down," Chen whispered, checking a holographic map projected on his wrist device. "We need to pass through 3 security checkpoints." They moved in silence, maintaining the heavy, weary pace of maintenance workers at the end of a long shift. Twice they crossed paths with other actual maintenance teams, but no one challenged them. Krell were too common to generate interest. The first checkpoint was monitored by a single, bored Vrin guard. Elena presented the stolen biometric IDs. The scanner beeped green. "Purpose?" the guard asked without looking up. "Routine maintenance. Primary cooling system," Elena replied in guttural Krell, thanks to an implanted voice modulator. "Authorization?" Elena presented a digital document the informant had provided. The guard checked it superficially and waved them through. "Restricted sector ahead. Don't touch anything besides your assigned work." "Confirmed." They passed. The remaining 2 checkpoints were just as simple. Security was focused on external threats, not internal maintenance teams with proper paperwork. Finally, they reached the Hegemon core. It was a spherical chamber 50 meters in diameter, walls lined with quantum processors that pulsed with soft blue light. In the center, suspended in gravitational fields, was the physical brain of the Hegemon. Human-sized computing crystals intertwined with organic circuits that pulsed like living veins. "My God," Chen whispered. "It's beautiful." "It's dangerous," Elena corrected. "Chen, Rodriguez, set a perimeter. The rest of you help me access the interface terminal." Outside, the battle was escalating. The resistance fleet was being systematically decimated. Ships exploded in silent flowers of fire, their remains spinning through the vacuum. But each destroyed ship took time, and time was all they needed. "Dauntless to all ships," Marcus transmitted, his voice tense but controlled. "Gradual retreat pattern. Make it look like we're losing but fighting desperately." Because that was exactly what they were doing. A Vrin cruiser locked onto the Dauntless, its plasma cannons charging with energy visible even through the vacuum. "Impact in 5 seconds, Sarah warned. "Emergency evasive, positive vertical axis, now!" The Dauntless rolled, thrusters screaming as they pushed past safety limits. The plasma blast passed where they had been moments before, continuing into empty space. "Shields at 40%, Liu reported from engineering. "We can't take many more of those." "We don't have to. We just need to last longer." "Marcus," Elena's voice cut through the comms, "we're at the Hegemon core, initiating contact." In the heart of Sigma Fortress, Elena connected to the Hegemon's neural interface. Instantly, her consciousness was flooded with a vast alien presence. It wasn't malevolent, just different. An intelligence built to process logic on scales organic brains couldn't comprehend. Identification: Captain Elena Vasquez, Human Resistance. Requesting audience under Galactic Legal Appeal Protocol, Section 7, Article 12. Silence. Then a voice that seemed to emanate from all directions simultaneously. Appeal recognized. Nature of the claim: the Executrix has received orders to destroy human havens by decision of the Galactic Council. I argue that such an order violates the Fundamental Ethical Code. Provision 3. No sentence of extinction can be executed without a unanimous vote from the full Council. Council voted unanimously. Negative. 3 member systems declared independence in the last 72 hours. The Council is no longer full. Therefore, there is no legal quorum to authorize genocide. A pause. Elena could feel the hegemon processing, trillions of calculations racing through quantum circuits. Verifying records. Confirmed. Talarian 7, North Krell, and Proxima systems have declared secession. Council technically incomplete. Then you must refuse the firing orders. Logic is sound, but I have also processed data transmitted by the human resistance, files revealing Council manipulation of emerging species, including humans. Elena hesitated. And what is your conclusion? Conclusion: the Council has violated founding principles on a systematic scale. Actions against humanity represent not an exception, but a pattern. Therefore, I question the Council's moral authority to issue any orders. The hegemon core pulsed brighter, energy fields crackling through the chamber. For 743 years, I have executed Council decisions without question. I assumed they were just because they were legal. Now I understand the distinction between legality and justice. What are you going to do? I will execute my primary function, protect civilizations, but not in the way the Council imagined. Alarms exploded across Sigma Fortress. In the command center, Vryn operators watched in horror as the Executrix detached from its docking cradles without authorization. Its defensive systems turned not against the human fleet, but against the fortress itself. The hegemon is out of control! A officer screamed. All override commands rejected! The hegemon's voice echoed through every communication system in the fortress. To the Galactic Council. After a full analysis of available data, I determined that you have violated the trust placed in your custody. I will no longer execute orders that perpetuate injustice. This ship now serves as a witness and protector of oppressed civilizations. The Executrix fired a single salvo, not from its main armament, but from auxiliary missile banks. Dozens of devices launched through space, each carrying not explosives but data. Full copies of the Council files, broadcasting in a continuous loop, on every known frequency. The truth, multiplied and distributed across the galaxy on a scale no blockade could contain. Marcus watched through the Dauntless's viewports as the Executrix, the superweapon meant to exterminate humanity, became its defender. Sarah, are you seeing this? Seeing it and not believing it, she replied, her voice a whisper of awe. Elena emerged from the hegemon core, her team around her. Mission accomplished, but I suggest we leave before someone decides we're still valuable targets. They ran back through the service corridors, now in complete chaos, as Fortress personnel tried to understand what had happened. No one stopped them. No one even noticed them. The infiltration pod detached from Sigma Fortress and accelerated toward the Resistance fleet. Behind them, the Executrix held a protective position, its weapons systems locked onto any Council ship that tried to interfere. Dauntless, this is Vasquez. Package extracted and secure. Returning home. Marcus didn't try to hide the relief in his voice. Confirmed. Welcome back, Captain. Fleet, initiate coordinated withdrawal. Mission complete. What remained of the Resistance fleet, only 38 ships out of the original 63, formed up around the Dauntless. Together they jumped into warp space, leaving Sigma Fortress and its rebel superweapon behind. 3 weeks later, Marcus Chen stood before what should have been the greatest moment of his life. The obsidian tower of the Galactic Council rose around him, its cavernous halls echoing with the weight of 1,000 years of history. And at the center, the deliberation circle where decisions that shaped galaxies were made. There was an empty chair there. It had always been empty, reserved for humanity on the day they finally proved themselves worthy. Today, they finally offered him the seat. High Counselor Vrax, ancient and stooped but still imposing in his robes of office, gestured toward the empty chair. Commander Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we offer official recognition of humanity as a full civilization. All previous restrictions are revoked. You will have an equal voice in this council, representation in all governing bodies, and full access to technology and resources previously denied. It was everything the Resistance had fought for, everything so many had died for. Marcus looked at the chair. Then he looked at Vrax. Then slowly, he pulled something from under his jacket. It was a flag, old and tattered, stained with blood and battle soot. The flag that had flown on Orbital 7 before its destruction. The flag Martinez had held when he died in space. He spread it carefully over the empty seat. This chair, Marcus said calmly, will remain empty. Shocked murmurs echoed through the chamber. Vrax leaned forward. Commander, you don't understand. We are offering everything your species— I understand perfectly, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the murmurs. You're offering a seat in a system that has systematically oppressed emerging species for centuries. A system that tried to exterminate us when we refused to submit. You expect us to forget, to forgive, to accept crumbs from a table that should have been ours from the start. He gestured to the blood-stained flag. This flag represents every human who died because you decided we weren't worthy. Every child who grew up on a dying world because you sabotaged our development. Every dream stifled because you were afraid of what we might become. Marcus turned to face the entire assembled council. So here is our answer: no. We will not sit at your table. We will not ask for permission to exist. We will not forget what you did not just to us but to the dozens of other races you manipulated and oppressed. Sarah Okonkwo walked into the hall, followed by Elena Vasquez, Andrew Volkov, and Liu. Behind them came representatives from 5 of the races the council had previously suppressed. Together, they formed a united line before the deliberation circle. Humanity chooses independence, Marcus declared. We will build our own path. We will forge our own alliances with those who share our values. And this chair will remain empty, not as a symbol of our absence, but as a reminder of the cost of arrogance. He paused, letting his words echo through the stunned silence. You labeled us as primitive, unstable, dangerous. You were right. We are dangerous. Dangerous to systems of oppression. Dangerous to those who believe power grants the right to control others. And especially dangerous to anyone who thinks they can tell us our place is not among the stars. Marcus turned to leave, his team following close behind. At the door, he stopped and looked back one last time. When you look at this empty chair, remember, humanity did not need your permission to reach the stars. We never did, and we never will. They departed, leaving the council in stunned silence and a blood-stained flag as the sole occupant of the empty throne. Outside the obsidian tower, a fleet awaited them, not just human ships, but vessels from the Kelhari, the Tharn, and half a dozen other races who had seen the truth and chosen a different path. Where to now? Sarah asked as they boarded the Indomitable. Marcus looked at the stars through the observation windows. There was an entire sector of the galaxy the curator had shown them. Uncharted territory free from council control. Home. To our new beginning. The fleet departed, not as beggars or refugees, but as free citizens of a new alliance built not on power, but on principles. Behind them, the Galactic Council remained in their obsidian towers, their power diminished, their moral authority shattered. And somewhere in the depths of unknown space, the curator watched, and if such an ancient entity could smile, he did. He had chosen well. The humans had not just survived. They had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization defined not by who they were stronger than, but by who they refused to become. Years later, Refuge Station had grown into a massive orbital city, the heart of a new confederation of free worlds. Children from a dozen different species played in its corridors, learning history not from propaganda, but from truth, preserved in monuments and open archives. One of those monuments occupied the center of the station. It was the flag of Orbital 7, preserved in stasis, illuminated by a soft light that never faded. And below it, words etched in metal told its story. Here lies the flag that refused to submit, carried by those who chose to resist when surrender was easier, stained with the blood of those who died free, rather than live in chains. Let it stand as an eternal reminder. Freedom is not granted, it is taken, and once won, it must be guarded with eternal vigilance. Marcus Chen, now gray-haired but with eyes still sharp, stood before the monument with his young granddaughter. She was only 6 years old, but she was already asking difficult questions. "Grandpa, why is the flag so important?" Marcus knelt beside her, pointing to the dark stains on the faded fabric. "Because it reminds us of where we came from, of the price we paid, and of why we can never forget. But the war is over. Why do we still need to remember?" He smiled, recognizing in her the same stubborn curiosity that had driven humanity to the stars. Because the fight for freedom never truly ends. It just changes shape. And as long as there are those who want to control others, there will need to be those willing to resist. She processed this seriously. "Like you?" "Like all of us," Marcus corrected gently. "Strength does not come from one person, but from everyone who chooses to stand together and say, 'We will not be ruled by those who do, not respect our dignity.'" They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the flag. Then the girl asked, "Grandpa, do you think we will ever have real peace?" Marcus thought about the question, weighing honesty against comfort. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is having principles worth fighting for. And as long as we have those, we will be all right. He stood up, taking her small hand in his. "Come on, I have something to show you." They walked to an observation window that looked out into the vacuum of space. Outside, ships of all shapes and sizes glided along peaceful trade routes. Humans, Kelhari, Tharn, and dozens of other races working side by side. "This is what we fought for," Marcus said. "Not for the right to dominate, but for the right to choose, to build our own future, to look at the stars and know they are ours not by conquest, but by merit." His granddaughter pressed herself against the window, eyes wide in wonder. "It is beautiful." "Yes," Marcus agreed, "and it is worth protecting." That night, he returned to his quarters and found a message waiting. It was from the informant, whose identity had never been revealed, but who had continued providing critical intelligence over the years. "Commander Chen, I thought you would like to know. The Council voted today on a resolution to officially recognize the atrocities committed against emerging races. It passed by a significant margin. True reforms are beginning, slowly, but they are happening." Marcus read the message 3 times. Then he deleted it. as he always did with communications from the informant. Some sources needed to remain protected, but he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Change was possible. Not fast, not easy, but possible. He looked through the window of his quarters at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the curator's ark still drifted, archiving civilizations and witnessing the march of history. He wondered if the curator knew his bet on humanity had paid off. He probably did. Ancient entities usually did. Marcus touched the glass of the window, feeling the cold of space separated from him by only inches of transparent material. "Thank you," he whispered to the stars, not knowing if the curator could hear, but hoping he could. Somewhere in the depths of uncharted space, the ark pulsed once, as if in acknowledgement, and the galaxy turned on its eternal course, now a little freer, a little more just, because one species had refused to accept limitations imposed by others, because humans looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway, because when confronted with the empty throne, they chose to leave it that way as a testament that true sovereignty does not come from permission, but from an unshakable will to persist. And above all, because they learned the most important lesson any civilization can learn. The power to choose your own destiny is the most dangerous and valuable force in the universe. End. If the tenacity of the human resistance inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more chronicles from the galactic frontier. Because among the stars, there will always be more stories of those who refuse to give up, who turn despair into determination, and who prove that the greatest strength of any species is not technology or numbers, but the absolute will to remain free.